when Paul reached out to me to be with you this evening and he gave me the list of available dates, I saw January 6th, and I thought, I want to be part of some counter programming on January the 6th. And that the Feast of the Epiphany is one of my favorites. And so it just felt so great to step in and say, let's do January. And I know it's hard for us to be here coming off of the holidays and getting back into things, and it's 60 degrees out, and what is going on, right? So I brought a couple of things to share with you, just some visuals to help with my talk. And one of the things that I've included is a Christmas tree. This belonged to my dear friend Rainey, who also passed away about 1.5 years ago. So having that out has reminded me of her. And it also reminds me of, you've probably seen on social media, the meme, it's from Downton Abbey. And the woman is saying, the tree remains until the Feast of the Epiphany. You will learn how things are done around here, properly. So the tree is still up at our house, I can tell you. So I brought the tree along as well. And then a cutie little there, because of the Feast of the Epiphany, I want to talk about the three wise men. But you know, three wise women would have asked for directions, arrived on time, helped to deliver the baby, brought practical gifts, cleaned the stable, made a casserole, and there would be peace on earth.
Amen.
So Father Ron Rolheiser, the wonderful oblate theologian, says that the miracle, the God of the Incarnation, whom we celebrate on Christmas, is more domestic than monastic. The God of the Incarnation is more domestic than monastic. And so we pause for a moment and give thanks and gratitude for those who are called into the monastic life, and what their prayer, how that's an act of service and of peace in our world. I don't know if you've been following the Walk for Peace through the southern United States, but there's a group of monks who are traveling by foot to Washington, D.C. They started in Texas, and just the amazing witness that they have been to people along the way, it's just really profound. And so that monastic life brings such gifts to us. And yet the God of the Incarnation, born in that dirty stable to a man and a woman, is more domestic than monastic. And so I thought, reflecting on the three wise women for a moment would be appropriate, finding God in the domestic. So Christmas is a celebration of that God incarnate, the God who joins us in our human experience. And two of the main sources for my teaching while we're together tonight is Pope Francis's apostolic letter that it was promulgated in December of 2019 called Admirabile Signum. Don't ask me to say that again. And then also I tapped into the International Marian Research Institute that's at Dayton, Ohio. And I have some wonderful work that Dr. Richard Lenner has done around Mary and the Magi. And he was part of a podcast that the Research Institute produces called All Things Marian. And they broadcast on what they call Radio Maria. Give it up, right? Yeah. So, hearing from Pope Francis, he offered a beautiful reflection on the Nativity. Admirabile Signum means enchanting image. So think about the creche and the nativity scene. It is indeed an enchanting image. So he returned to Greccio, which is the Italian town where St. Francis of Assisi first staged the first nativity scene. He returned to that town as his apostolic letter was being brought into the world. So, excuse me, the Pope said that the depiction of Jesus' birth is itself a simple and joyful proclamation of the mystery of the incarnation of the Son of God. It's a living gospel. Contemplating the Christmas story is like setting out on a spiritual journey. And we'll talk a little bit about a spiritual journey with the three wise men and with ourselves. We are drawn by the humility of the God who became man in order to encounter every man and woman. Pope writes, so great is his love for us that he became one of us so that we might in turn become one with him. More domestic than monastic. So, the meaning of some of the creche elements, and I'll focus in on our big stars tonight with the three wise men, but the starry sky wrapped in the darkness and silence of night. When we've experienced that darkness in our lives, even then, God does not abandon us. The Pope writes, his closeness brings light where there is darkness and shows the way to those dwelling in the shadow of suffering. The landscape around the creche often includes ancient ruins or buildings. As I carried my creche in this evening, Paul commented that it looked like maybe, kindling or spare wood as we brought it in. It's a little rough around the edges. Grew up with this one. This was under the Christmas tree every year as I was growing up. Missing baby Jesus, of course, and no presents were to be opened until the baby Jesus arrived. But these ruins are visible signs of fallen humanity, of everything that inevitably falls into ruin, decays, and disappoints us. This scenic setting tells us that Jesus has come to heal and rebuild, to restore the world and our lives to their original splendor. The Pope then focuses on the figures of Mary and Joseph. Mary is a mother who contemplates her child and shows him to every visitor. In her, we see the Mother of God who does not keep her son only to herself, but invites everyone to obey his word and put it into practice. St. Joseph stands by her side, protecting the child and his mother. There's a thread of devotion to St. Joseph. Joseph is the guardian, the just man, who entrusted himself always to God's will. But it is when we place the statue of the infant Jesus in the manger that the scene comes to life. Pope Francis says, it seems impossible, and yet it is true. In Jesus, God was a child. And in this way, he wished to reveal the greatness of his love by smiling and opening arms to all. The creche allows us to see and touch this unique and unparalleled event that changed the course of history. But it also makes us reflect on how our life is part of God's own life. In the book, The Drama of Christmas, Morton Kelsey writes, I myself am very glad that the divine child was born in a stable, because my soul is very much like a stable, filled with strange, unsatisfied longings, with guilt and animal-like impulses, tormented by anxiety, inadequacy, and pain. If the Holy One could be born in such a place, the one can be born in me also. I am not excluded. As the Feast of the Epiphany approaches, and it is indeed here, I know we celebrate that on Sunday, January 6th is the original date, we add the three kings to our setting. Their presence reminds us of every Christian's responsibility to spread the gospel, writes Pope Francis. The Magi teach us that people can come to Christ by a very long route, but returning home, they tell others of this amazing encounter with the Messiah, thus initiating the spread of the gospel among the nations. We are on a kind of journey with the Magi, especially during the Advent and Christmas season. We come bearing gifts, setting out in haste, seeking the light. We have gifts for others and the gifts we've been given by God in our talents and blessings. So I want to spend a little time with the story of the Magi. And I want to talk a little bit about that word story for a moment. When we think of story, we often think it's something made up, right? Like a fantasy, something that's out of the ordinary and that maybe would never happen. But then there's also that idea of story that's in that expression, here's my story and I'm sticking to it. Story is the way that human beings connect with one another. That we are biologically wired for story. And when we share our story with one another, magnificent transformations take place. I know that's so much a part of your journey, Paul, is creating that container, that safe space for stories to be shared, hearts to be open. And when we're able to share our story in a safe place, how God's grace enters in, right? And the healing occurs. Such a profound thing. And so every Advent and Christmas, we cycle through these Christmas stories again. And you might think, oh, I know how that goes. We all know how that story ends, right? And yet, we are new every year when the top of the church calendar comes around again, when it's Advent again. And so we bring a new self to that story. And as people of faith, we're invited to find, how is God speaking to me in this? Right now, in this place, in this domestic moment, if you will. And so recently in my own journey, I have transitioned out of not as much like direct church ministry, if you will. I was with the Archdiocese for a number of years. I have a master's in pastoral ministry and served in a number of capacities. And over the last 10 years or so, I've transitioned from that work into more storytelling work. And I'm an editor and a writer now, and I help people tell their stories. And my commitment to story is that I want to help bring into the world those stories that are uplifting, the good, the true, the beautiful, because God knows we need it, right? Yeah. And so I'm excited to share with you this story of the Magi, because there really is only so much we have from Scripture that tells us about this visit. And there are some layers of meaning and names and ideas that have sort of been added on over the years. So I'm going to depend on the scholarship of Dr. Leonard to present to you what we know about this story, and then a reflection on it in terms of our own discipleship and how Mary is such a wonderful mediator and witness and model for us of what discipleship really means. So I'll speak a little bit to that story, and then I have another version of the Magi story told in song, and that'll kick off our time for conversation and reflection. So, we doing okay on time?
Yeah. We're doing great.
Great, okay. All righty, so the story of the Magi. This is it, and I'm sticking to it. The biblical account tells us about the Magi, who were very wise and insightful people who traveled from somewhere in the east, a very great distance, following a star to come and see Jesus. Their story is recorded in Matthew's Gospel, the 2nd chapter, verses 1 to 12, and it is in many ways a fulfillment of biblical prophecy regarding the coming of the Messiah as well. On their way to find the Holy Child, following the star, they visit King Herod and say, we're on the lookout. Can you give us any any directions? And this shakes up King Herod a little bit, because he hadn't really heard about some new Messiah showing up. What was this about? But he invites the king, the three kings, the three wise men, to go on his behalf and to please report back to him. But he's disturbed by this. So the Magi continues their journey, and ultimately they present to Jesus the gifts that we know: gold, frankincense, and myrrh, right? We are like the Magi, and Dr. Leonard says we've been given the gift of faith, and we follow that gift. So we're kind of like the Messiah, and those people that accept that a Messiah is coming, a person who leads us to our greatness, to the best that we can be, which was Mary, Our Lady, and her son. huge significance for Mary in Matthew's telling of this story, because the gospel specifically mentions Mary holding the child when the three wise men arrive. And she had not really been mentioned in Matthew's gospel. Most of the nativity narratives that we have come from Luke. So it's significant that Matthew centers Mary in this scene holding Jesus. She's the one holding the infant Jesus. And here is a practical application of Mary's role in our faith. Not to be the object of our faith. Mary's not the object of our faith, but rather we go to her because she is the one who's going to bring Jesus to us. I love that beautiful motto that you have here. To him, through her.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what I see, we see this so often in many depictions of Jesus with Mary, that she's holding the infant Jesus, and it's a visual representation of the incarnation, because Mary brought him into the world, right? And so we come to see him and she holds him up. And I think that what's so beautiful about the visit with the Magi for me is that it's as if Mary, and unfortunately she's not shown holding him here, but she is adoring him quite lovingly. In the midst of the darkness that surrounds this scene, and we'll talk a little bit more about, there's kind of a dark background behind the beauty of this scene. In the midst of this darkness, Mary holds Jesus to the wise men and says, here he is. And I think that speaks so much to our human experience as well, is that in the midst of the darkness, God is present. God is born into the heart of that. And we are invited to turn our attention and our focus to it, to God, to the power of God in that. And your music was so beautiful because it's just, here I am, right? That powerful centering. And it's as if Mary just is so excited that we've shown up. Here you go. This is it. And this is the secret. This is the heart of it all, is that attention. Fix your eyes. Fix your eyes right here. And all the rest of this steps back, disintegrates in the face of such love and joy, right? So if you're going to have an encounter with Jesus, this is one of the most powerful things I thought Dr. Führer had to say. He said, if you're going to have an encounter with Jesus, you have an encounter with his mother as well, since Mary is the vessel through which the incarnation took place. When you have Mary and Jesus together, it's a representation of the incarnation. Mary with Jesus is an affirmation that the incarnation really took place. Like, we know this happened. Mary was the vessel, and that is one of the reasons why we honor and venerate her. So this encounter with the Magi, and Matthew's very specific, pointing out that Mary was there holding the baby, such profound theology going on there, right? The incarnation right there, the story of the Magi, nested within that is that image of the fullness of the incarnation. The God of the incarnation, domestic, there in the manger, where the animals are taken care of, where the work is being done, the love, the adoration. So we see each of the kings carrying one of the gifts that we know by the back of our hand, right? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The gold, as we know, represents Jesus' kingship and royalty. But the frankincense also is connected to his kingship and his divinity as well. The frankincense is, in those days, was often burned. Incense was often burned in the presence of royalty. And then we know that that's a very important part of our rituals as well, that the incense is brought out during the high ceremonies and is often accompanied with the prayers of the faithful, that we lift the prayers to God, and it's that symbolism of that. So the frankincense is a symbol of that divinity as well. And then the myrrh is an oil that was used for the anointing of the dead, and as we know is symbolizes what lay ahead for Jesus in his ministry and in his work. And so this is where that darker aspect of the story rests behind the joy and the beauty of the nativity scene. And again, in the capacity as storyteller, Matthew is telling the story to his community through a lens that has seen the passion and the death and the resurrection. So as he revisits this story, he's looking and pulling out the clues. Yes, yes, there it was, there it was, there it was. And when you were in that stable in that moment, you may not have seen that or known that. Mary, who held so many things in her heart, had a deep sense of it. Whether she knew the details of it or not, I'm not going to speculate on that, but I do think that that profound presence and connection that she had to God and to Jesus gave her a sense that there's some big stuff going down here, right? And so that bittersweet presence of that myrrh, that oil that can soothe and heal and be a balm, and is also a part of that profound gift that Jesus will give us in his life. The Magi also are symbolic for us who were not of the Jewish faith as Jesus was born into the world, that Matthew's making an important invitation and statement about that Jesus is the Messiah for Jews and non-Jews alike. And that was a very important piece for him in telling this story to his community as well. And so again, we see how Mary anchors our faith and our discipleship, that she is the one who presents Jesus to the first non-Jewish, to the first Gentile people who come to visit. And so that profound opening of the church and of Jesus' availability. So that's another important piece of it. Let's see, and I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything here. There's an element of danger surrounding the story as well, with King Herod lurking in the background, right? And he's waiting for the wise men to report back to him. But the wise men are very wise, and they figure out what he's up to. Thanks, and we make other arrangements and we go. But in that context of that political upheaval and that maneuvering, Joseph and Mary have to make a decision too, right? And so they become refugees, and they flee to Egypt to avoid the wrath of Herod, who has heard about this newborn king and wants to protect his territory, right? So the paranoia of the king creates this background for them, and they too become refugees. And so, again, in Mary stepping into this role as the mother of Jesus, she suffered in so many ways that we do, that others in our community and in our world that we see are experiencing this suffering. And so what Mary anchors for us and feels for us goes beyond a sympathy or an understanding. It's a genuine empathy. She knows. To quote Dr. Lenar, he said, when we think about all the suffering that's going on in our world today, the places that are like Gaza and Ukraine and other places in the world that are devastated by war, Our Lady can very much relate to individuals who have suffered loss because of being forced from her home, because of political turmoil and military conflict. She's been there. She's been there. And I think this kind of experience, the whole experience of the Magi episode, when you take it together with all the other suffering she endured during her lifetime, these are things that make her a very powerful mediator. Powerful indeed. She willingly accepted the cost of following God's will. She was present at all the key events of Jesus' life, from his birth, through his death, to his resurrection. She was in the upper room at Pentecost. She bookended, encapsulated his entire ministry. She carried that for us. She's a significant figure in the life of our church. I mean, that's just an understatement, right? So there's this timeless presence that we experience with Mary. Her example and her experiences remain so relevant to us today. She's been there. Perhaps we don't always think of that when we think of the story of the manger with the Holy Family and the angel and the animals and the angels and the Magi together. There really is this deeper meaning to the story, and it shows Mary bringing Jesus to the world. It's like the heart of our theology. It's the heart of our understanding. In fact, my friend Father Bill Hartenbach used to say to me, everybody makes a fuss out of Easter, and he's like, Easter's a big deal, don't get me wrong. He says, Christmas? The fact that he showed up at all?
Yeah.
Kind of a great perspective, So here we are in this moment with the Magi. So what I'd like to do in the spirit of story is, I think that Mary's timeless presence serves as a guide for all of us who are navigating our own challenges. And this beautiful interpretation of the wise men's journey in the song that I mentioned earlier, I think is one of those individuals who is navigating his own challenges. And so I'd love to invite you into his story. I've got some handouts with the lyrics. And here's what I'd love you to do is, if you're familiar with Lectio Divina, you take a scripture or a passage and you just attend to what speaks to you. As you're listening to the song, kind of listen with a similar heart. See what words or phrases from the song speak to you. If you have a pen, you might just underline or jot them down, but it's not necessary. But just attend to how they speak. And I want to talk a little bit after the song about the transformation that our King goes through in this song. And then that can also be a starting point for our conversation too.
Once, such a long time ago, I left all that I know, the things of kingly life, the ease of my warm palace home, the toils of my throne, to seek a heavenly child. Full of wisdom he seemed, full of goodness and light, and hope to rid the world of its woes. So I knew I must go to find the heavenly child. There's only so much a king can do to feed and clothe his multitudes, give them comfort for their cares. And oh, they cry for justice and for love. I thought the child from above might be an answer to their prayers. the traveling was hard as we followed that star many long desert miles. There were times we would mutter, "What's the use?" And we said we were fools to seek the heavenly child. And then one fair evening we found a simple stable near a town, a mother cradling her own. And lo, the boy was beautiful to see, a child heavenly indeed. We gave him frankincense and gold. That was a long time ago. And still the child haunts my heart, but I've not returned far to look into his eyes. For in the faces of this very kingdom, every daughter and son, I see the heavenly child. I see the heavenly child.